Straight in, yeah. Yeah, all ready?
Let's go.
Hello, welcome back to another episode of Propaganda. Today we're going to be taking on the subject of dreaded black mould and damp, and also just touching on what a buyer needs in place if they're getting ready to buy, looking to buy, what they need basically. But I know we sometimes say, you know, what have you guys been up to this week? I've just got a little fun fact to you if we have a little rewind to the first podcast. I've not really been doing much over the last 6 weeks. As you can probably tell, I've not left the house, not had a shave. I've not really left, but I've been getting into my, I always like watching, as you're saying, true crime, things like that. And I got really into the Great Train Robbery. If you guys have seen any of that. And do you guys, go on?
I've got a little fact about that.
Yeah.
So my brother-in-law...
Is Ronnie Biggs?
No.
Yeah.
His girlfriend, for a long time, worked in the pub where apparently it was planned.
Really?
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Who's that? Who?
Charlie's
So
wife.
Really?
Charlie's girlfriend was the landlady for the pub where it was all planned upstairs in the library.
She got a nice house. Anyway,
And £1 million in the bank.
do you watch The Sopranos? You seen The Sopranos?
I don't watch it, mate.
You've never seen The Sopranos?
No, never seen it.
No,
never.
not me that.
I mean, don't
fuck
let that
me,
take
that's
the wind
a
out
good
of
fact,
your sails.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Don't even
I don't know
watch
where you're
it.
going with
This is the most famous show in the world.
This is too old for me.
Too old.
Yeah.
What, 40 off, mate. Jesus. Anyway, so it's a fucking useless fact now, but there's a song at the intro of The Sopranos. You've probably heard it.
No.
The main guy who set up the Great Train Robbery is a guy called Bruce Reynolds.
Okay.
His son is in the band that does the theme tune for The Sopranos. But if you're not interested in the Great Train Robbery, not seen The Sopranos,
No, I've certainly lost me on that. Yeah,
not a very good fun fact.
I preferred your...
you should
Sean.
maybe run that bars in
Sean de Paul.
pre-production.
Oh, what's the
isn't it,
point
all
in
the way
that?
First. The Sean de Paul one was way better.
It was way better, yeah.
Yeah, Sean de
I
Paul.
bet millions out
Chandler,
there,
yeah, that's it.
millions. I bet everyone out there thinks that's a better fact, mate. If you're into your crime,
Great stuff.
a lot of women listen. I'll give you another fun fact. In podcasts,
More women listen to true crime podcasts than
than
men.
men, yeah. It's the only genre. Maybe we'll change that of property. Anyway, moving on. So this time of year, obviously February, bit colder, darker, damper, wetter. We get it every year, don't we? There's damp in properties, black mould in properties. It always comes up. It comes up on surveys, and it affects pretty much everybody. It was obviously a very tragic story that happened before Christmas in, I think it was Rochdale. There was tenants in a property. It was riddled with black mould, damp, and unfortunately a young boy lost his life over it. And they said that the main cause of that was due to black mould and damp. So, you know, without kind of glazing over that, because that's obviously a very serious thing, but, you know, how dangerous is it? You know, how big of a thing is it? And, you know, is there loads that you should be worried about? I appreciate that sounds like quite a damning statement of saying, you know, a young boy's lost his life.
I mean, dangerous, yes. How dangerous, I guess, all relative to the individual house and how bad. I think if you look at the pictures from the one where that situation was in Rochdale, like, it was terrible. Like, you're talking thick black mould all over the walls. We're not talking your typical kind of in the bathroom on the ceilings and black spores that have appeared because no one's opened the window because it's, you know, it's cold in the winter and don't want to vent out from a shower. I mean, it was horrendous. So look, there's always I guess the upper end, isn't there? Like the worst case scenario versus kind of the least. And I think probably more frequently, if you're going to speak to anyone who's had issues with mould or damp, normally it's fairly minor. I mean, in some cases it can be quite bad, but I've never seen anything to the extent of those pictures.
Photos?
Yeah. And look, I mean, we've God knows how many flats I've been in and out of over the 14 years, but we manage, I don't know, 200, 250 flats as well. I mean, we're in them constantly. I've seen some bad flats where people have not ventilated at all, no windows open. You know, they've got washing, drying in the front room constantly, so they've got condensation everywhere, and I've never seen it to that extent.
No.
So I think that's probably an individual, an
Yeah.
isolated case, you'd like to think.
Yeah, you'd hope so. So the problem with it is that, as Alex was saying, it's subjective, first and foremost. You know, a few spores, is that a massive issue? Maybe, maybe not, because it also depends on the risk of the occupant. You know, someone who's got yourself, you've got asthma, so you will be more susceptible to illness as a result of black mould. If I'm not mistaken, it was black mould that killed Brittany Murphy. Am I making that up?
I think that was heroin.
Pretty sure. Was
actually, mate.
I feel like I've heard that somewhere. I think producer Ben's just going to double check that fact. But it can, but it is one of those things where actually it's about the extent of the issue. Much like damp, all of these things, if they are left, if they're not looked after, and there's a certain amount of responsibility that occupiers need to take in terms of clean. I mean, you mentioned your own place when you get condensation on the windows kind of in the morning, that Hannah's straight over there, wiping it all off, wiping it down.
Squeegee.
Especially
this time of year, mate. Windows always open out that shower.
Yeah.
Freezing.
Yeah, but it's got but the problem is that when you always get condensation in winter, right? And that is not because of anything other than the fact it's freezing cold outside. It tends to be hot inside, or you're creating moisture, and no one's venting out, right? So all the hot air and all the moisture attaches to the window, and then you get water dripping everywhere, and it attaches to the ceiling, and no one vents out. And I don't, you wouldn't want to isolate one from the other, but we've dealt with many properties that have been owner occupied for a prolonged period of time, and very rarely do you find that there are huge amounts of issues. And that, whether that's because of the homeowner, you sort of learn with it over time, and you got more time to play around with it. In a lot of rented properties, you see these issues pop up in short periods of time, because for whatever reason, maybe they don't vent the property as much. They haven't lived in it, so they haven't sort of understood at different times of year what to do and how to control it. But if you live in a flat or in a house in winter and you're showering in the morning, there's two of you having showers, 20 minutes, half an hour of steaming hot water, you're going to have to open a window to let that vent out. Do that, and all of a sudden you'd start to eradicate the mould growth you see on most people's ceilings, which is, I guess, normally the biggest thing. It's just moisture in bathrooms.
Yeah, but what about, like, say, I mean more personally, like this time of year when you're selling a property, for example, it's going through, you get a survey gets done, they've ventilated, they've had the window open, they've got air vents, they've got extractor fans, there is no sign of damp in that property, get a survey done, surveyor goes around, flat's riddled with damp.
I mean, that is just your typical, I guess, the damp surveyor or damp company.
Then they get a damp survey.
Yeah, I mean, most damp surveys, I think the difference that you'll see if you're dealing with people getting surveys for damp or moisture is that the free surveys that most people get will typically just come back with one option, and that is to tank or just to do some sort of damp course. Doesn't ever really explain possibly where the issue started from, where it stemmed, and maybe what to do to stop that first. Versus when people spend sort of £300-400 for an independent specialist to go in there, you often find, you'll see the reports, we've had them before from a chat we've used in the past, I've seen from, the reports of 10, 15 pages long about actually where the issue's coming from. That might be the ground level outside is too high and it's causing issues with moisture on the inside of the wall. It might be the fact that there are, I don't know, maybe there's 4 people living inside a 2-bedroom flat, and therefore the humidity is incredibly high because people are breathing all night long, and actually giving you more information about it. So I think people often just default straight down the line if there's any form of moisture in a property that it's damp, and actually there's a big difference between damp and condensation. Damp is normally formed, I guess, by some sort of water ingress from externally getting in, whereas condensation is born from the inside trying to attach to your walls and causing issues. So 2 completely different issues and 2 things that should be looked at, I guess, in different ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you will.
I mean, the problem tends to be more highlighted at this time of year. So what you've got at the moment is the other issue in terms of the cost of living crisis. So we are seeing more and more issues, particularly with mould build-up as a result of people trying to save money by reducing the amount of heating they're doing. Now, without trying to bore people to tears, you've got something called the dew point, and the dew point is the point at which water vapor within the air will condense because it becomes there's too much water within the air. Now, the higher the temperature, the more water vapor can be in the air.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're running your heating at, just for argument's sake, 23 degrees, nice and warm, you can have a lot of water vapor stored in the air. If you start to reduce the level at which you heat your property, less water vapor could be stored in the air, and the dew point is then lowered.
Yeah.
Now that water vapor has to go somewhere, and once the air gets too cool, it will condense on the coldest parts of the building, which, as Alex mentioned earlier, tends to be around windows, in the corners, external walls. So particularly with showers, what you tend to find is if you've got a shower that part of it or part of the room is on an external wall, you will get condensation happening around that external wall, again, particularly in the corners. Now, over a couple of weeks, realistically, it's unlikely that anything's going to happen. Over a couple of months, you will start to see, if it's not being wiped down, if it's not being taken care of, you will start to see the mould building up, because it will naturally just start to grow. So there's two ways generally in which to combat condensation. One is you raise the temperature. The second is, as Alex mentioned, you ventilate the property. The extractor fans within bathrooms should be sufficient to get most of the moisture out. But as Alex mentioned, if that's not working, the easiest thing to do is open the window, let it kind of dissipate naturally.
Yeah.
The problem is at this time of year, people don't like opening their windows because it's bloody freezing. And if you're already trying to save money by not having the heating on, the last thing that most people are going to do is open the windows. Yeah. So it is a bit of a problem. And it's not even just the showers. You know, an average person will breathe out, I think it's 2 litres or the equivalent of 2 litres worth of water vapour over a 24-hour period, if I'm not mistaken. Then you add to that cooking, you know, heating up pasta or whatever. And if you've got kids, it's more baths, more showers, more water, more breathing. And it's an awful lot of water vapor that's being trapped inside properties that potentially aren't being heated correctly, and then in turn are also not being ventilated because people don't want that cold air coming in, so aren't opening windows or closing their trickle vents on the double glazing. You know, they quite often recommend you open your door for a couple of minutes to allow the water vapor on a daily basis.
On the front door.
Yeah.
Just to clear the air out.
Just to clear the air out.
Allow you to wave down the street.
Yeah, absolutely. Open the front door, open the back door for a couple of minutes, let it all flow through, shut it, you know, away you go.
And that's, like you'd say, that's what, you know, with condensation and mould when it's on ceilings and stuff, is that I guess it's always tends to be defaulted to there's a problem with the building or there's a problem that someone else did. And actually a lot of it's just how you manage it and deal with it. You need, of course, if you can get yourself a decent extractor fan, that's going to clear most out. I mean, we haven't opened up the windows in our bathroom all winter, but we've got a decent extractor fan and there is zero problem at all. That's, you know, sometimes you go in some properties, don't you, and you see an old Victorian house, they wouldn't have had a powered ventilator, so they've got air bricks. You go in, people have shoved tissue paper in it, they sellotaped over them, and they wonder why there's condensation and mould. It's because there's no airflow. And actually one of a client of, I say a client of mine, someone that I'd met doing a valuation for, I went round and he was saying, look, I've got to be up front, we've got a damp problem, we've had a damp company out and they told us, you know, this is what we need to do. So, you know, we'll walk around, let's have a look at it. And, you know, he's got some in the sort of typical areas. And he was saying that the damp company had said, you know, we need to do some tanking, right? Where they basically hack the wall off up to about 1 metre, 1.2 metres, and then they render it all, they tank it, and it's to stop the moisture getting in. And I just said to him, you know, aware that a lot of these damp companies just default to tanking, I said, you know, if they told you what the problem is, well, yeah, you know, we've just got some damp. I said, but do you know where the problem is? How about if you stop the source of the problem, then maybe it will stop the issue internally. And he took me in the bedroom and said, you know, we just keep getting water here and there's black mold and black spores. And I'd noticed at that point they had a newborn baby. So I said to him, you know, did that start happening when you'd had the newborn? Oh, yeah, I think it did. And I said to him, you know, it's just very typical. All of a sudden you've got a bedroom in a 1-bedroom flat, which now has twice as much furniture because there's a cot, a baby changer. Everything's pressed up against the walls. You and your wife are sleeping in here, the baby's in here, and you're drying clothes. All of a sudden, that moisture level has just gone sky high, and the ventilation's just been reduced. So actually, if you just reduce that, you reduce your problem. Rather than spending £4,500 for someone to come and put tanking on your walls, you don't probably even really need.
Yeah. Do you want to know what the main cause of that issue is likely to be?
What?
The bottle steriliser.
Well, you reckon that pumping away the whole time in the kitchen? Yeah.
Because it's just
constant.
Steam.
Yeah, you might as well just put an air purifier in there that's kicking out water.
Or the dad under serious stress and just smoking his vape pen indoors all day.
You're talking from experience there, Jack.
Absolutely not, James.
That's the mould in your lounge, is it?
Nicotine free.
Yeah, a lot of it is down to the way in which people are using the homes, but there are also the defects.
Yeah.
Double glazing, for example. So going back to the older period properties, back in the day, you would have had timber sash single glazed windows. You would have had kind of exposed floors in areas, open chimneys.
Yeah, all of that is natural ventilation.
Yeah. So properties just ventilated because they were drafty, and even now we still hear. I mean, you see it on an EPC certificate, don't you? The ratings, they are not that brilliant when it comes to insulation. No. And then the problem is when you start to insulate them, they aren't designed the same way as a modern building is for ventilation. They don't generally have mechanical ventilation throughout that purifies the air and takes out all the moist air and replaces it with fresh air from outside. So you get problems, and it does generally tend to be the older buildings that have these issues for those reasons, as we've tried to kind of limit the carbon footprints and sort of deal with the energy efficiency of properties. Push has come to shove, and they aren't actually designed to work that way.
That's why I see as well. There's like the 70s, 80s, 90s new builds. They're just block squares, no ventilation, no nothing, and they get all sorts of issues because actually there just isn't. They don't have air bricks.
Yeah,
so unless you're physically punching holes and putting in mechanical ventilation.
You get a lot of it, don't you? Like the first time buyers out there, they get a survey, damp. A lot of them, you have a lot of properties withdraw. Not a lot, but like of the ones that fall through, I'd say there's a fairly high percentage of people who are like, it's damp, it's terrified of damp. This is going on. You're like,
everyone
quite
just
often
defaults to damp and just assumes it's the worst thing in the world.
And then you get the company, like you say, come around, it needs an injection, it needs to do this, and it's like, like you were saying earlier, you got a damp-proof course. 9 times out of 10, how many of them outlast their guarantee? They all need redoing. It doesn't mean anything.
But it's not. It's just whether or not they're fixing the problem. That's what I mean. It's not that. Let's go back.
And
to
the
that.
gutter's still filled up with leaves. And
that's still dripping down the side of the wall.
And then if you get some rooms or some houses where you're upstairs, all of a sudden you got these black mould marks. When we bought our house, I noticed in the corner that it was all wet in the corner, and most people would have, it's damp. You get yourself a damp surveyor. And it's thinking, well, this is on the second floor at the roof line. Right? This isn't damp. Let's find what the problem is. And lo and behold, outside, gutter's got a split, and it's just pissing water down the wall the whole time.
We got
sorted that dry.
We got a friend, Jamie. He's just had his bathroom done. He's like, it's riddled with damp. There's loads of damp, and I'm like, there's rising damp. We've got a rising damp issue. This house is a nightmare. I'm like, there's probably a reason that's happening, Jamie. Like, does it? Is there something on the brickwork outside? There is a reason that property is like. It's also in a bathroom as well. So it's like that might be an issue. And he's like, no, it's not. And then he paid X amount for a damp-proof injection. He's getting the bathroom done anyway. They hacked away all of the wall, and he's like, oh yeah, there's a pipe.
Got a burst pipe.
There's a pipe that's dripping.
Yeah,
there you go, mate.
In my
there's always a reason for it.
In my experience, most damp issues are as a result of a defect elsewhere in the building.
Yeah.
And actually, you deal with the defect, you deal with the damp.
And that is a surefire way of stopping it coming back, rather than trying to effectively paper over it, plaster over it, and it might find its way in somewhere else, or the damp proof course fails, or something to that extent, and you end up just constantly paying out these big sums of money.
For me, it's the most frustrating thing if a property falls through because of that. Because when they're saying, the rising damp, it's like, why? It's not just going to start rising up. There's a reason.
The thing is, a lot of people don't. It's easy to sit there for you and I, or for everyone to be like, oh, it's so annoying, because you deal with it day in, day out. You kind of understand the differences, and also you kind of know. A lot of it isn't as bad as what people say or buy into, but to buyers, when they think the house got damp, you almost see it as like it's got some sort of disease and it's going to be riddled with it. And unless it's fixed majorly, we can never live in that house. Because sometimes they come out of rental properties where landlords haven't fixed the problem and they've been left with damp, mould, or whatever it might be. When actually it's if people knew more about it, or maybe if these damp companies weren't so... I guess the free companies that say you got damp so they can get themselves business, it's kind of just push you around in a bit of a circle.
Yeah, my issue with those is there is a conflict of interest there.
It's a surveyor telling you need to do work, who then provides you the option to do the work.
It's also the amount, though. We had a 2-bed flat last year, the year before, I can't remember, it's all a bit of a blur. 2-bed flat, not massive, 700 square foot flat. They said there's 27 grand's worth of damp work that needed
Which
doing.
is ridiculous. I mean, I've never seen one that high personally.
Fortunately, the buyer was like, that just seems insane.
Well, that's always funny enough, that's what Kevin always used to say, wasn't it? If you have a house and someone's gone in there and said it's got damp, and he's like, well, you go in there, right? It's completely bone dry, and you're telling me that a little meter with 2 metal prongs has gone through a bit of plasterboard on a dot and dabbed wall and it's telling you the brick's damp. He's like, how's someone telling you that when there's not even a problem?
He used to drill through, didn't he?
Well, that's how you would take
the dust is dry. It's not damp.
The brick
There's
sample,
dust. It's not a paste.
Yeah, the problem with the damp meters are A, they're calibrated for timber anyway, and B, it's done through electricity. So the way in which it's measured is it's how quickly the electricity goes from one prong to the next. And the issue with that is particularly on the period stuff, most of it has at some point or another suffered with damp.
Yeah.
But the problem is once that's dry, you've then got the salts that come out as a result, and electricity travels very quickly through salt. So even if it's dry, it will still come up. It will give a high reading on the basis that the electricity is travelling through at a rate equivalent to water.
I'd say every survey that they get.
I've never understood that. Yeah.
So basically between the two prongs, it's the speed at which the electricity travels through.
And of course, it go through slow if there's no water or any
If there's
damage.
no water, it's not a great conductor of the electricity. It's a low reading.
I'd say nearly every survey you get, though, they say there's damp.
Yeah, I mean,
not on new build, stuff like that. But the vast majority of stuff we sell are period properties.
And to be fair, there probably generally is some, but it's also not as big a issue necessarily as it's made out. The ones that most of the issues that I see with damp when it comes up on a survey is as a result of higher ground levels on the outside of the building.
Where it's
what's
gone past
happened
the
is
old original
it's bridged,
damp proof.
It's bridged the damp proof course. So essentially what you've got is the water, it's not rising damp in that it's rising through the damp proof course. It's rising damp in that the damp proof course has essentially been covered by the external ground, and the wet ground is just soaking through into the bricks above it. So you get damp readings. And actually, in most situations, lowering the ground level will solve the issue for most people.
Yeah.
Or as Alex alluded to earlier, it's another defect elsewhere in the property. In his case, it was guttering. Guttering is one of the most common causes of damp inside properties, because people don't realise that the guttering's leaking, and you've got water pouring down the side of a wall. They're aware of the damp, but they don't tend to take note. And the reason for it is when it's raining, are you outside looking at what's going on at your property? No, of course you're not. You're inside where it's dry. So people tend not to realise that they've got a defect with their guttering.
I think that is the point, isn't it? Is that old houses are always going to have problems, right? They were built in the 1900s. There aren't times where they factored everything in or had the technology to create these perfect kind of damp-proof courses. So they're built on a bed of bricks with normally slate sometimes, isn't it, in between the brick?
Slate is the damp-proof course.
As a damp-proof course. And the moment the ground level outside, if someone kept building on top of that and building on top of it, which people do because it's cost effective, all of a sudden you breach that, and water then starts sitting on the brickwork, and that will seep through. But how much of an issue actually is it? Normally, as you say, most times you can't even see it, but someone tells you there's damp, and people end up spending $5,000 hacking a wall off with no problem to put it back on.
I mean, according to the building regs, your damp-proof course should be 150 mil above ground level, which essentially is 2 brick courses. And that's to protect it from splashback. So when the rain is coming down, that's what the building regulations says should be a sufficient height that the bricks above that aren't getting saturated in heavy rain. But I can tell you on most Victorian buildings I see, because of exactly the reasons that Alex said, over the years, patio's been laid, then we don't really like that patio, we want something else on top, and the ground level's just been raised up and up and up.
The best one, I think, is when you go and do a view and you go in the cellar. Oh, that's damp. And you're like, well, it's a cellar.
It's underground, mate.
What are you expecting there?
Most of them have got rivers probably not too far below them. So there's
got one at the moment that's got on.
We have. I mean, we've just. I'm just about to exchange it. We sold a house for Christmas, and I mean, in our, where we are, there is literally a river that runs through the middle of the area I live in, where I also work. And in this, I did a viewing, opened up the door and thought, it's a fantastic cellar, right? So I've got to show someone, put the light on, big puddle of water, almost like a little swimming pool. The guy's like, what's going on down there? And I was like, well, it's a cellar, isn't it? It's underground, mate. What levels there is? And the guy didn't buy it, obviously, in the end, but it does happen, Regularly, you'll see basements fill up with a bit of water and it will sink back down.
At the moment, he's got a drain under there, and sometimes it just...
Well, the water table's also rising.
Yeah. Below my office has a pump under there because it's regularly a swimming pool. Yeah. It's like the Peckham Springs.
Okay.
All right, Del Boy.
Sheesh. So basically what you're saying is generally if there is a damp defect, 9 times out of 10 you don't need a magic injection or anything.
It's not
fix
that.
the defect.
Find the cause before
problem.
you just start spending thousands of pounds internally putting up a screen to try and block it. Find the issue, sort the problem, and normally that helps you more in the long run.
Yeah, get independent advice is the primary one. You know, if you're not sure what you're doing, go and seek independent advice, not someone who is related to a company that then provides the rectification. Get someone completely independent to look at it. And I would always say start with the holistic approach first, which is rather than, you know, chemical injections and tanking and all of that stuff, which has its place. There are times where actually it is needed. Start with things like lowering ground levels, installing trickle vents into double glazing that doesn't have it.
I thought holistic meant having like the stones on your windowsill and stuff, and putting incense burners on those. Get away the bad energy.
But yeah, in the context of this one, it means more taking an approach.
Sense.
Yeah, taking an approach that doesn't involve altering the main sort of construction of the building.
Oh yeah, that came out, wasn't it, in the news? The peace lily, which is now available, according to NASA, is something that will reduce your mould.
Actually,
Mould and damp, was it?
We've got
mould spores.
We've got one in our playroom, and I'm like, oh, that's really good for that. David said he's got one that's dying. So stop arguing with your missus then. Not very peaceful. Fair enough. A lot of people who are watching this might be, you know, buyers, first-time buyers in a chain, thinking of making the move. And for people out there who might be interested, whether they've done it before, it might have been a long time ago, whether they're first-time buyers, what is the sort of things that they're going to be facing? You know, what should they expect? What do they need to get into place? And is there a cost that, you know, a lot of that might come to?
So from your first-time buyer's point of view in particular, it's helpful to do your background due diligence before you go out viewing. Is the first thing I would say, because it's very hard to try and understand actually what your affordability is without speaking to someone in the industry who deals with it, whether it's a mortgage broker, your bank directly, a financial advisor. So just do your initial background research on the actual affordability side of things. So first thing I would advise someone to do is go and get a mortgage in principle. The truth is...
And how easy is that to do?
Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. I mean, you can do it directly online with a lot of lenders these days. I would.
Are they worth the paper they're written on?
They're an indication of what your affordability is.
If you put in true information, it will give you a truer idea.
A mortgage in principle is not a mortgage offer. Okay, a mortgage offer is the bank has agreed to give you that money to buy that property. A mortgage in principle is actually exactly what it says. It's a mortgage in principle. You can, in theory, borrow this amount of money. As Alex was saying, if you put in all the information, it will be more accurate, but most people don't because they don't know what they need to put in and what they can leave out. But it's a good indication for people. I think for a buyer who's not gone out, not looked before, it is the first step. Go and get your mortgage in principle, work out actually what your affordability is. Don't worry too much about which lender it is initially. I wouldn't say, you know, cross that bridge actually when you found a property, but just to get an idea of what you can afford. And then once you've got that, go out and start viewing. You know, the first step with that is obviously Rightmove, Zoopla, agents' websites. Go and do a recce of the area. Go and walk into estate agents' offices. I personally think it's very difficult when you first start looking to identify exactly what you want. And I generally advise buyers who have just started their search to have a full day of viewings. You know, don't try and be picky over the property that you want in your head. Actually look at your affordability, look at what's available in the area that you want to be in, and just go and see stuff. You know, try and get between 5 and 10 viewings booked in for a Saturday and go and have a look. Yeah, absolutely. There's no point in kind of you just starting on your search and go and see 2 properties because truthfully, you might have an idea of what you want, but you don't know until you start walking through doors. And actually, if one of those properties is perfect, it's far easier to know that if you've seen 7 or 8 that day than it is if you've just seen 2. And how many times do we see it where, you know, we show a property to a first-time buyer, they really like it, but they're not sure because they haven't seen anything else. They come back 3 weeks later, oh, can we offer on that one? And it's gone.
Yeah. Or you'd see your first time buyer, you know, they register. We absolutely need a 2-bedroom flat, and end up buying a 1-bedroom garden flat around the corner. Sometimes you buy something completely different because actually once you start looking, you start thinking, actually, you know what? Do we need this? Do we want that?
Yeah.
And actually you can sort of work through and
They're
chalk
rarely
it off.
perfect as well. I know you say it's a perfect thing, but they're rarely perfect, are they? It's like, well, I'm going to have to compromise on, you know,
Yeah,
this
if
is
you
a
see
station, or
5 or 6
that
compromises
one needs a bit of
easier.
work, that needs a kitchen, or, you know, that one's got the garden. There's always going to be, you're not ever going to tick really every
Unless you
single
know,
box.
unless you in the industry in some way, shape, or form, and you know exactly what you want to go and buy because this is what it's going to be. You just get out there, kind of do a bit of looking around, get to know the agents. The agents then get to know you. They'll help you out, maybe give you a bit of information, maybe the benefits on one flat over another, which you probably never understood. Help you more on, you know, I guess understand a bit more insight on leasehold, share of freeholds. There's so much that. There is so much to do with property when you start looking at it that, you know, the more that you see it, the more you understand it about it sooner, the far easier it'd be to make a decision. Once you've started getting into it, you then obviously need to start thinking about, I'd say your deposit is probably a big one at the beginning. Obviously you're going to need to know what your deposit is. And I guess for some people, don't just think...
You need to know that. Obviously, you need to know
the
that.
one thing I have to say
before
about
you're out
deposit is
viewing,
that, you know, let's just say you had £50,000. People don't just assume that's 10% and therefore I can buy £500,000, right? Obviously, your affordability is based on your income.
Yeah.
Your deposit obviously is then a percentage of whatever that is, and you put it towards it. So deposit's just a good one to know, that don't just base your affordability that's 10% of X. Deposits ideally would be readily available, or if you're going to be getting them gifted, or if they are coming from stocks and shares and need to be liquidated, obviously bear in mind you don't need that at the beginning. You will need to understand or show proof of where that's coming from.
Yeah.
But as you lead towards the end of the process of purchasing, obviously you're going to want to make sure that's available to use, because that will hold up your ability to exchange. Solicitors are a big one. I think for any first-time buyer, really probably recommendations is the easiest way to go about that. You can look online, of course, and kind of, I guess, shop around, but do not go with the cheapest option. You know, I'd always try and go with someone who's got a physical office. You know, I think some online ones are good, but, you know, I guess a physical office where you might be able to go and hand documents into, sign contracts, do your ID checks if you needed.
But are they that important? They must all do the same thing, people might say.
Not really. I just,
All
you know,
checking
I
for the
guess
same thing.
that's probably from some sense of an old school way. You know, a physical office means there's physical people you can go and see, and that they've got, I guess, a brand that, you know, they're kind of the face of. So you'd hope that service level is of a certain level. But actually being able to go there sometimes is quicker. If you're relying on post for everything, signed contracts sometimes need to be hard copies. Doing your ID, and I suppose can all be done this time electronically, but just being able to go somewhere, I'd find is
I
always
mean, what about when it's actually being, you know, the conveyancing process is going on? Why is it so important? I know this is a massive subject, but just like, why is
a
it so
lot of
much better
solicitors
for
have
that?
popped up, and a lot of the online solicitors are cheaper because they don't have overheads. But then you get what you pay for with solicitors. You know, solicitors are the key part to a transaction. You can be the best buyer, the most easy laid back person in the world, who are a fantastic estate agent. But if you've got a really poor solicitor that either has a massive workload because there's only, you know, everything goes to 2 solicitors in one firm, they don't spend that on other resources, you get a bit at the bottom of the pile. It's going to take forever. As I say, service is everything. You get what you pay for. A decent value of a solicitor will give you a good service and will help things move forward a lot quicker. So, which is why I say about recommendations. There's so many to look at online. Speak to friends, family, cousins, uncles, the estate agent you're buying from. They're always going to know 2 or 3 that they've dealt with and had good experiences with. And don't just think they're just trying to push you in an area because they get kickbacks or whatever. You know, the estate agent's going to be, most estate agents will be doing it from a purpose of trying to make sure you use a decent solicitor so things go through smoothly. Not just because they're getting £50 in their back pocket or something, which they should tell you from the up. You've got to disclose that kind of thing. But solicitors are a huge one. Surveys, you need to get surveys when you're buying. Mortgage valuations come with your lender. They're going to be the people, you know, your mortgage lender will offer you that and provide that for you. But home buyer surveys, building surveys, structural engineers, all those kind of things are a big one to think about. Typically, first time buyers, home buyer survey, level 2 is your kind of entry level survey that you'd be encouraged to get. Which I don't know if we spoke about that before on a podcast. Maybe we'll speak about surveys more, but level 2 average survey is a home buyers. Next one up from that's a full building survey, which you typically see on houses and bigger properties.
Yeah, makes sense.
Would you agree?
Anything you want to add on that?
No, not particularly. It's yeah.
Just
perfectly
when you're
Is there
getting
any,
going,
like,
you
little-
just need to make sure your finances are in place. You understand loosely what you want to go and buy based on what you can afford. get out there, meet some agents, get viewing, and just get going with it.
Get looking.
Any bit of a curveball here, but any pitfalls that you might, or that's worrying, or
I think the difficulty is the issue with the way the industry is itself. I think if you're one of those buyers that ends up offering on something that it later transpires isn't quite what you thought, or has a history that the lender won't lend on it or whatever, that is the pitfall of the industry. It's not actually as good as it could be in that regard, although they are making changes to try and sort that. There's new requirements that agents have to meet in terms of the information that they display, particularly for leasehold properties, which I think is hopefully going to make it a little bit easier for buyers to be able to make an informed decision about whether or not they want to offer on a property, rather than in some instances offering blind without really having enough information to make an informed decision, then finding out 3, 4, 5 weeks down the line, having spent money on solicitors, surveys, mortgages, all the rest of it. So I think the pitfalls are always going to be there, but my advice to anyone is, if you see something and you like it, offer on it. Because
I'll tell you the matter thing. Do not be put off because a flat has been on the market for 6 weeks and no one's bought it. If you go there and you find a problem, then fair enough, but don't be put off just because someone else hasn't bought it. Very rarely is a property not sold because it has a real detrimental issue. It's probably just had a bit of bad luck. Maybe it was overpriced at the start. Something's gone just amiss on the way through. But just if it suits you, then just keep your eyes open to it. That's where some of the I guess the better deals could be found. The ones that people don't want, there's not always a reason for that. Sometimes it's just a bit of a bad run of luck for that owner. So I'd be open-minded to most of it. And do know you're going to get into... likelihood is you could be at a chain, not all sales go through nice and quickly. Some can take a while, and that's not just because you have unnecessary delays. When you've got 4 or 5 people trying to do the same thing, it can take some time.
I think as well, like people out there people who are out there listening, you're like, it's a fun thing to do. Do you know what I mean? You're going to buy your first, that's exciting.
Exciting,
it should be amazing. Like, we're going to go. It's a massive financial commitment. You should go out and be like, wow, this is so cool. Like, I'm actually going to go and buy somewhere. I'm going to be in here. You get a bit of independence, all the rest of it. I think a lot of people just get bogged down with it, don't they, sometimes? And it's like, it's becoming such a chore.
It can be quite overwhelming, I think, can't it? There's a lot of stuff that goes on. A lot. I mean, we had a girl once pull out her dad was financing the whole purchase, but it got so much of it that she pulled out on exchange and said that it was just all a little bit... All of a sudden, she was going to become a homeowner and take on responsibilities and have a service charge to pay and lease to deal with and all of this, and it can be quite daunting. So I guess just if you have questions, queries, reach out. Your estate agent is going to be hopefully as experienced as anyone to give you advice and help you through some of it. If they're good.
I remember my first purchase. It was just like, it was so exciting. I just, when I got that mortgage offer, it was like, even though we hadn't even excited at that point, nothing was legally binding, but just getting that mortgage offer and being like, oh my God, I can buy
we always say
buy a flat.
We were, I mean, I'm working, even on the second time purchase, I've been working in the industry for 7, 8, 9, 10 years by the time we were buying, and I was just as excited and just as nervous as any other buyer, even though I do it for a living.
I'd say more nervous.
Yeah, probably.
I was
so on edge. Yeah.
It's true. It's true. But it's such a lovely feeling, that.
I agree.
Massive achievement.
Every milestone, from the mortgage offer to the exchange to completion to picking up the keys, opening the door for the first time.
Find out you got damp.
Yeah, that's it. Walking in, there's water pouring through the ceiling.
Got a cellar.
It's a lovely feeling. It's a really, really lovely feeling. And you get
away from paying that landlord's mortgage you've been paying for the last 5 years.
Oh yes.
Or when you're still at your mum and dad's,
not paying anything, and then you take on a huge outgoing, hits you. That disposable income drops.
Just a quick one to finish up. Just a bit of fun, really. What's like, I don't know whether it's you personally or what you've seen in the industry. Don't have to be too elaborate, but like, what's the biggest fuck up that you've seen or you've done personally?
I've not done too many. There was one last year where lovely client, really, really lovely client, fortunately, where I pulled her boiler cupboard door off. Didn't mean to. I'm not that strong. But yeah,
you said a few weeks ago you've been going to the gym.
This was before I started at the gym. Just literally pulled the boiler cupboard, showing obviously an applicant where the boiler is, opened the door, and basically it came with. And and I texted her and kind of said, look, I've had a quick look around without being too nosy, under the stairs and kind of in the shed. Can't find a screwdriver. Can you let me know where one is? Because I need to put your boiler cupboard door back on. And bless her, about 5 minutes later, she turned up, straight through the house, out to the shed, back in with a load of tools, electric screwdriver, bosh, cupboard doors back on. So yeah, that was one of mine. It was an accident.
That's not too bad.
Yeah,
I can't really think. I
really
honestly
good about it.
Not on the one, but not on viewings. When I first started, but when I'd been in maybe a year or two, still an office junior, I think I was doing lettings. I was doing a handover anyway before I was going away on holiday, and had a file with she was a horrid woman, this lady. Emailed our office on a circular and included Sophie, who was my colleague, but had emailed Sophie, the client, telling everyone what a bitch this lady was and to watch out, and then badmouthed her fully on an internal email and copied her in on the email.
Oh my God.
Wow. And then had to email her immediately apologising.
So I'm really sorry.
Because I noticed that, in the moment you hit that button, you're like, oh shit. Yeah.
It's too late. It's done.
That's probably...
Do you hear some horror stories? I mean, not necessarily with us, but there was one before. I've got other mates obviously working in the industry, not just exclusive for us,
people's posts,
opening people's posts, being caught, stuff like that. Like, that's fucking... Yeah. You've got to be somewhat crazy to be opening people's posts and question why you're doing that anyway. I think my worst one, to be fair, was... I was quite green around the gills, and I was doing a bit of lettings. Lettings never really been my forte. I was more doing sales, and it used to be a little bit kind of bit part. And unfortunately, I moved a couple into a flat. I was very young at this point as well, and I wasn't sure it was going to be my career. But I'd moved the couple into a flat, and they've turned up, come and got the keys, big storage van, unfurnished flat, and it was fully furnished when they when they got there. Well, not fully furnished. It had a bed, a wardrobe. So, I mean, to be fair, I took responsibility for it. Went round there, took one of our colleagues,
Frank,
the admin guy, went round with a tool set, took apart the bed, took apart the wardrobe, and was driving around southeast London in a little DS3 with half a bed and a wardrobe hanging out the back of the car. But yeah, you do hear some...
You've done that the once when you first started, have you? We've done that.
Yeah. Well, the second time wasn't actually... That was actually down to the landlord.
Second time he rented a storage unit to store the furniture, which ended up costing about...
That was actually the
£200.
landlord who had agreed previously that this furniture was going to stay. Didn't tell us. We checked it and was like, that furniture's still there. And he was like, yeah, cool. And then the people moved in and they're like... Oh, sorry, he was like, that's all going to go. And we were like, yeah, cool. The people have moved in, turned up. I mean, to be fair, I went above and beyond, went and got a van, rented a storage unit, because he was like, they're really personal.
I was going to say, he really wanted to keep them, didn't he? And then 2 weeks later, he said, I want to throw them away.
I've got his bed. I put it in a storage unit because he was like, I want to keep it. It's very sentimental to me. I bought all of this furniture. It was my first home. So I was like, oh, fuck, you know what I mean? It's just a cock up, whatever. Put it all in a storage unit for him. Was there for 6 weeks. And I was like, mate, I can't keep paying for this forever.
You were paying for it?
Yeah, and then he was... Well, I was like, I mean, he's been a long-term client. It was like, we still manage it. And I was like, for the sake of a couple £100, whatever, let's just get this sorted. And then like 6 weeks later, I was like, yeah, I'm not just going to keep paying for this. And he was like, just chuck it out, mate. And I was like, what? Like, I could have just got that cleared that day. And he was like, yeah, so...
But you got a bed out of it?
Well, I got the bed frame. I didn't take his mattress that had been rented. And one of my mates has got his drawers. And who took his table? Somebody took his table and chairs. Got it cleared out pretty quickly. But I was like, could have just done that on the day. But yeah.
They do happen.
They do. I've not made many, though, I will say.
We are still human.
Just a few. Yeah. Oh, they happen every day, don't they? But not massive scales.
Minor ones, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for listening, guys. As always, we will be back next week. I don't know what we're actually covering that one on, so we'll have to pick that one out and tune in and find out what it is next week.